I would kindly ask all participants to please mute yourself so we can be starting with our session today. Um, well, I'd like to welcome all of you here today, but this is already enough from me. We'll get the official welcoming from our PCCB member, Jairo. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Isabella. Hello and welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Hairapet Hakopian and I'm a member of the Paris Committee of Capacity Building, and I would like to warmly welcome you to this event, Fast Partnership Unlocking Climate Finance for All. This event is led by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in collaboration with YOUNGO under the PCCB Network. Before we dive deeper into the theme of this event, I would like to quickly introduce you to the PCCB, which stands for Paris Committee on Capacity Building. The PCCB works to address gaps and needs, both current and emerging, in implementing capacity building in developing country parties. Additionally, the PCCB seeks to enhance capacity building efforts, including coherence and coordination in capacity building efforts related to climate change. To support the PCB's mission and mandate, the committee launched the PCB Network in 2020 as a voluntary association of interested stakeholders engaged in climate-related capacity building. The PCCB Network provides a platform to share information on best practices, contributes to the work of PCB in fulfilling its mandate, and seeks to connect with its peers across sectors and regions. As of today, the network unites 410 organizations from 100 countries actively engaged in various aspects of capacity building related to climate action, such as Roald Wallenberg Institute, which get to exchange their technical knowledge and expertise through events like this. To learn more about the PCB network, and how to become a member, follow the link on the chat. As we all know, achieving the ambitious goals set by the Paris Agreement requires not only innovative approaches but also substantial financial investments. Recent analysis revealed that current climate finance investments in agri-food systems are insufficient for the necessary systemic transformation. The shortfall is especially detrimental to vulnerable populations, including women, youth, indigenous people, and rural communities, who bear the brunt of global hunger and climate change. The Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation FAST Partnership aims to reverse this trend by driving effective actions and ensuring that climate finance reaches those who need it most. This event is not just a discussion, it's a step towards building the capacity required to drive systemic transformation in agri-food systems. By bringing together key stakeholders, we aim to foster collaboration, share best practices, and identify actionable solutions that can support our collective climate action goals. I'm excited to hear from our distinguished speakers, experts, and practitioners who will share their invaluable insights and experiences on accessing finance for agri-food system and the FAST partnership. On behalf of the PCCB, I would like to thank the FAO team for collaborating on this event. Thank you as well to our all panelists and our audience. Now over to the team of the FAO who will be moderating the session to kickstart the session. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction. I would like to just take a moment to introduce our next speaker that we have. So my name is Glendiz Virginia Luciano. I'm with the YOUNGO Food and Agriculture Working Group. And we want to give, once again, a very warm welcome to all the PCCB network members, colleagues, and friends for being here today and for taking the opportunity to be part of the FAST partnership Unlocking Climate Finance for All. I just want to reiterate that this session is co-organized by FAO, YOUNGO, and YPARD and hosted by the PCCB network. So we have a fantastic session ahead, as our colleague mentioned before. And after a short introduction to climate finance and the FAST partnership, We will listen to a rich panel discussion where different stakeholders, as was mentioned, will share their experiences and lessons, as well as to take a look at the obstacles that vulnerable groups face, what climate finance is needed to transform agri-food systems, and then the potential of the FAST partnership in being able to enable all of this. So we're also going to ask that throughout the webinar, because we don't want this to just be a speaking panel, to really take the opportunity and encourage you all to paste any questions that you may have in the chat. Later on, we will have a dedicated section for questions and answers where speakers will address any questions that you may have. Now, I will take the opportunity to pass the floor to our first speaker, which is Giulia Galbiati from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, who will facilitate today's panel's discussion and will also provide you with a brief introduction on the FAST partnership. Over to you, Giulia.
Thank you, Glindis, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here and good participation. And I'm Giulia Galbiati. I'm a climate change specialist in the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment in FAO. I'm currently also coordinating the task force of the FAST partnership. Before, again, we dive into our panel discussion, I will be giving you a short presentation of the FAST partnership. It's the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Partnership, and it stems from a COP27 initiative launched from the presidency of Egypt in 2022. And we were able to hold our first high-level ministerial event for the FAST partnership members in COP28 in Dubai last year. And we're now moving fully into implementation. The goal of the FAST partnership is to improve the quantity and the quality of climate finance to agri-food systems. So before we dive into actually the work of the partnership, I wanted to first to see with you exactly why are we here and why there is the need to talk about climate finance in agri-food systems. It is a very crucial topic as a key bottleneck in agri-food system transformation, as we know that agri-food systems are increasingly vulnerable to climate change, while at the same time are producing at least 1/3 of global greenhouse emissions. We know that climate finance that goes to agri-food systems, it's not going in the right direction. Here you have the results of two studies, one from the Climate Policy Initiative that looks at total climate finance, and their analysis revealed that only 4.3% of total climate finance actually goes to agri-food systems. FAO has done a similar analysis, but focusing only on international public finance, what we call climate-related development finance. And here we have seen that over the past years, or rather decades, the share of climate-related development finance going to agri-food systems has been steadily decreasing. 2021 was the last reported year. That's why you're seeing this number on the screens. We're waiting for 2022 data to see if this trend is still decreasing or it is changing. So this is our starting point. This is what we're starting with. So there is really the need for concrete actions to try and reverse this trend of climate finance and make sure that climate finance really goes to agri-food systems as sectors that are seen as worthy of investments. So this is why, with this in mind, the FAST partnership was launched. Again, it stems from a presidential initiative. FAO was tasked with its operationalization. We're currently counting 30 members and 8 observers. The FAST partnership is open to governments, civil society organization, intergovernmental organization, multilateral development banks, academia, farmers organization, and indigenous peoples. And in particular for CSOs, for civil society organization, we have a particular focus again on women-led and youth-led organizations. Actually, they also have a seat reserved on the board because we want to make sure that their voices are heard. The FAST partnership operates around the 3 pillars. One is access to finance, the second is knowledge and capacity, and then we have policy support and dialogue. We held our first members meeting back in April, where we decided to move forward and work around the 3 working groups that follow the 3 FAST pillars, and we decided on a work plan. And the reason we're here today organizing this event with the PCCB is because with the FAST partnership, we really value the importance of knowledge and capacity building as one of the key aspects if we really want to make this sort of narrative shifts and make sure that agri-food systems are seen really as worthy of investment and able to attract the right climate finance. So the reason why knowledge and capacity are so important is because it gives us a better understanding, no? And analyzing the data and making sure we have a good understanding of what the landscape of climate finance actually looks like. It gives us a better understanding of what needs to be done. At the same time, we're able to produce evidence-based recommendation for policymakers that can support informed decision-making. And of course, with the capacity building aspect, we're able to foster sustainable action at national level, where countries are really able to have ownership of climate actions that tend to improve climate finance. And at the same time, also in discussion with our members, it was clear how it was key to promote peer-to-peer learning and knowledge exchange among members that could make sure that what's already happening and what's already working in a country can benefit the work of others. So this is why the FAST really decided to have 1 pillar and 1 working group dedicated exclusively to knowledge development and capacity building. This is just a quick overview to let you know, where we are with the partnership. Again, we started in 2022. In 2023, we started the operationalization of our work, and 2024, where we're now, where we held our first members meeting and we started the actual implementation of the work plan, looking for 2025 to continue scaling up the work of our activities. So this was just to give you a quick introduction of what the partnership looks like. And I'm now very happy to be able to move to our panel discussion. And where we will be hearing from our panelists to really know, how to increase, what are some tangible action or some challenges that we're facing currently, in leveraging capacity building on how to increase the quantity and the quality of climate finance with the vulnerable groups. So I'm glad to give the floor to our first panelist, who is actually Glyndis again. So as mentioned, she's the YOUNGO Food and Agriculture focal point, and she will be speaking to us now with some insights on youth involvement and youth capacity building within YOUNGO. So thank you, Glyndis, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you so much also for the overview. I think it's a great way to get started. As Julia mentioned, I'm Glyndis. I've actually been involved in YOUNGO for a little over 3 years now and have taken on the role this year as being a co-contact point. Now, for those of you that may not know, I will not assume, YOUNGO is the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC. And so our goal really is to be able to bring the voices of youth visibility to the work that youth are doing and ensuring that young people are present in the negotiation process that are taking place under the UNFCCC, namely in events such as the COP as well as the SBs. Now, YOUNGO in general has multiple working groups, and of course, I'm coming from the Food and Agriculture Working Group, where we follow the agriculture negotiations, so the KJWA, which then became the SSJW, for example, and we are, of course, very supportive of these agriculture negotiations, but we have also made it a point to be able to work with other working groups, including the Finance and Markets Working Group, as an example, to be able to merge the topic of climate finance with agri-food systems and to really bring in that youth perspective that is crucial to be able to achieve the goals that we want to. So I just wanted to give a quick overview in terms of kind of like what are our points of advocacy. So some of the points of advocacy include agroecology, the just transition, particularly when it comes to food systems and financing food systems, the inclusion of people in vulnerable situations, which include, of course, youth, small-scale farmers, women, and Indigenous peoples, and then the adoption of a food systems perspective. So these are some of the points that we strongly that we've developed a position around and are important to us. Now with the finance and markets group, of course, they have a strong focus on climate finance, and particularly being able to bring to develop capacity buildings for young people to be able to learn more about climate finance and then how they can access this finance as well. And then they also, of course, follow the negotiations around climate finance. So we've realized also around the year 2022 as well, which correlates with when food became really big at COP in general. We had all of these food pavilions, that there was also now a very strong interest on how we can look beyond the agriculture negotiations and look into other processes that were ongoing and how food could also be relevant there. And so through the work that we've done actually with the Finance and Markets Working Group, we have been following the NCQG, which is the new collective quantified goal, as well as the Paris Agreement Article 2.1, because we do think that there is a relevance there in terms of financing food systems. When we're looking at the new collective quantified goal and what we're following there, we see that the inclusion of quantitative sub-goals as well as qualitative indicators can actually support in measuring progress for financing climate resilient food systems. And we also see that the same is also applicable to being able to achieve the 2.1C, which we are going to also be following at the SBs this year, especially when it comes to aligning polluting subsidies, as well as looking at public and private finance. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because since all of these things are happening, it's obvious and normal that perhaps the average young person might not have the skill sets to be able to understand how all of these negotiations are going, processes are happening, or understanding that. So we have a very strong component on what's capacity building. And of course, as Julia mentioned, this is a crucial pillar, not just of the FAST partnership, but also again of YOUNGO itself, to be able to provide young people with the necessary skills and understanding of what's happening, and especially in a topic that's so crucial like climate finance. So Julia already mentioned the number 4.3 of climate finance that actually goes into agri-food systems. So we can imagine how much of that actually is able to target young people or people in vulnerable situations, a much, much lower number. And so for that reason, when we're looking at the work that we're doing in YOUNGO, we've actually launched a Climate Finance Academy in 2022 with the goal of being able to provide workshops and capacity building around general topics related to climate finance. Up to date, around 200 young people have actually been trained. And of course, as I mentioned, always with the strong component of climate finance with that youth perspective or youth focus. Now, in collaboration with this working group, we have launched the Food and Agriculture and Climate Finance workshops, which have had a very much stronger focus, of course, on the intersection between agriculture and climate finance. And to give you some insight of some of these sessions, this has included looking beyond the agriculture negotiations, so looking, for example, at the Emirates Declaration, the FAST Partnership, other initiatives that are already ongoing, because although we're very supportive of agriculture negotiations, we do understand that these processes take a long time. So we want to be able to capitalize on other initiatives that are ongoing to be able to push forth the food systems agenda and make sure that the necessary action is taken as soon as possible and not necessarily waited out. Aside from these capacity buildings, we have also seen the importance of being able to hold consultations to be able to inform the work that we're doing as well. And we recently had one actually last year at the World Food Forum. We led a couple of sessions focused on food and agriculture, and there was a specific section that was focused on finance and adaptation. And of course, there was a strong consensus from young people that youth want more access to climate finance, that there is a need also to have more data and studies available to be able to support the positioning and our advocacy efforts at a global level, but also that this is important to be able to support countries in being able to take action. So data and studies are important. This then leads to then why the FAST partnership. And this is a part where we, of course, see a multi-stakeholder partnership being able to support the work of a youth organization. And that collaboration is crucial. Multi-stakeholder partnerships are crucial to be able to take the next step and to be able to pool resources and make those connections that maybe are not there, not because they don't exist, but rather because the connections have not been made in the first place. So again, to reiterate the need to work beyond the negotiations, we've also have taken a look, for example, at the different pillars. I know that this one is focused, let's say, on capacity building and knowledge, but we also see how the other pillars are still interconnected at the end of the day. Even when we look at the access to finance pillar, that there is some of the outline objectives include, for example, being able to do collective analysis of data to be able to support countries, for example. We see that as a way of being able to come in and help to provide coordination so that we're able to get that information that's needed also from a youth perspective. The same way of obtaining best practices from countries. Again, this gives us also an opportunity to be able to support and bring together already the community of young people that we have working at the local level to be able to support the work of countries as well. And so while we may see that the pillars are separated, we still see how interconnected they are. And we also see that as an added value of how we can bring added value as a youth constituency, but also how other partners can bring value to the work that we're doing as well. Now, I'm already coming to an end here. And I just wanted to emphasize that we're working at a global level, but at the same time, these are the people that make up our network are people that are working at a local level or youth-led organizations that are doing work at the local level. And our work, aside from being able to strategize and be able to support advocacy efforts, let's say within UNFCCC processes, at the end of the day, it is with the goal that climate finance targets agri-food systems and also people in vulnerable situations so that at the end of the day, they're able to implement their climate resilient agri-food systems projects. For that reason, I'm also really excited to hear from our next colleague, I know from YPARD, because they're going to talk more about that local perspective, but I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to share how from a global perspective, we're still able to support what's happening on the ground as well. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Glindis. That was really a great intervention. Really gave a very nice overview of the work that you do and the challenges that, some groups are still facing. And I think, listening to you, that's one of the key points, right? That we have to remember is that connections need to be made. It is not a given, that not everybody is necessarily aware of the challenges that some specific groups are facing. So that's why it is extremely important to make the connections first, to make people aware that there are these kind of challenges, these kind of barriers for specific groups. Here we're talking youth, but same could be said for women, for indigenous peoples, for family farmers, which are exactly the beneficiary of the work of the FAST partnership. And at the same time, the importance of disaggregated data to have an important scientific base where to start from, to have an understanding of what's happening and then help the advocacy, as you said, but also support on the ground activities at national level. So that's really very key points that you were making. And I'm really happy now to pass the floor to our second speaker, Kofi Akwaye. He's the regional coordinator of YPARD, the Young Professional for Agricultural Development Network, and he will share some lessons learned and experiences on really how to include the youth in climate finance, with the special attention here again at project funding and project development at regional levels. So Kofi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's exciting to be here, and from YPARD's side, we're excited to be part of this conversation. Because it helps us as youth to transition to a green economy, which will help us create a new economic opportunities for youth to also thrive. And we realize that for us as youth in the finance discourse, we feel we should be involved because we could serve as accountability checks and help achieve the overall goals of reducing emissions and also being responsible with the work that we do. And so in order to help promote quality and even quantity finance for youth, YPAD has been part of the FAST partnerships since the first civil society consultations of the FAST initiative. And we are glad to make this statement in coordination with YOUNGO for that initiative. And in this, we call for finance, which addresses the main barriers that youth face in leadership in the food systems, and then increasing finance to food and agriculture. This is a critical part of the climate mitigation and adaptation for the health of people and the climate. And we say, as members of the FAST partnerships steering committee, we continue to call for actions which are youth-centered, which centers around people and using youth as protagonists of the solutions for climate finance. Like I said, we believe a lot in the power of youth. And so our work actually focuses on empowering and enabling young leaders around the world to shape and transform agri-food systems. And in the discussion of climate finance, YPAD would like to highlight a few things that would help us notice good entry points for youth inclusion in climate finance. And this includes involvement in decision making. We see that as youth are involved in decision making, we bring on board the uniqueness and innovativeness that we have in us as youth. And this is important at all levels, from local to national. It helps to facilitate the transfer of non-cognitive skills and competencies that would help us foster some kind of shared responsibility, not only being left for adults, but for youth as well, that would be responsible for our environment. And we see that the FAST partnerships can help youth initiatives. It can help link youth initiatives such as YPAD with actions at the country and regional levels to coordinate youth engagement and decision-making from policy to implementation. Another important entry point is capacity building and training. And like Glingis rightly said, all the pillars of the FAST partnerships seem to be interlinked. Because these pillars talk about access to finance, they talk about knowledge and capacity, they talk about policy support and dialogue as well. And we realize that to the kinds of capacity building that we have, this actually speaks to, it is a holistic way of addressing the needs of actors in the space of, those who would benefit from the climate finances, because it addresses our capacity to reflect and learn. It also talks about our capacity to engage in leadership and political discussions. And all these come together to help us contribute to adapting in the environment. And so to contribute to the creation of a more inclusive and efficient agricultural and food systems, YPAD has been committed also to transforming the mindsets and perceptions of youth towards agribusiness, equipping youth with appropriate agribusiness skills, knowledge and information, and enhancing, facilitating the transfer of knowledge among youth, transfer of even, facilitating the adoption of technologies that would help us be resilient, not just as youth, but as actors and players within the food systems. And one thing that one of the projects that YPAD has been connected with is the global program for small-scale agroecology producers and sustainable food systems transformation. I'll place this in the link, but the acronym, I'll place it in the chat. The acronym is GPSAEP. And this is a project that looks at increasing access to knowledge and also empowering 10,000 small-scale farmers in 10,000 small-scale farmers who are in this ecological transition through participatory rural advisory services and also farmer-to-farmer joint learning. I'm excited also to see my colleague Glindis on the call because she was very instrumental in getting this project started. This is an EU-funded project which is being run by that's AFAS, GFRAS, the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services, and Uganda's is it the Uganda Forum for Rural Advisory Services as well, and then in partnership with FARA. And these are ways that we get to train our youth on agroecological practices that help us transform the food systems. So yeah, I'll try and make it snappy. I'll just mention one more thing that is important for us to pay attention to, which is advocacy. Advocacy is one of the points where youth can, one of the entry points for youth when it comes to the discussion on financing, climate financing. And this is because in this space, youth are able to contribute to structuring policies and services that programs, policies and services that affect youth's lives. And it helps to adequately address our needs and interests through advocacy. And with this, YPAD has been involved in a number of these, but I'll mention just two of such platforms. YPAD was involved in the crafting of the Kenya National Youth Agribusiness Strategy, which focuses on increasing the resilience of livelihoods and disaster among the objectives of the strategy. There are many objectives, but among these is that one, and it aims to promote youth inclusivity and climate smart agricultural technologies, and also create green jobs for environmental sustainability. We are also connected with the Consortium of African Youth in Agriculture and Climate Change. Sorry, all these initiatives I'm mentioning seem to have long names, but the short name is KAYAK, and it's a unifying youth network that aims at linking youth in the grassroots with policy at the national level, at the regional level, and at the continental level. So KAYAK envisions a unified and inclusive network of youth in agriculture and climate change, while enabling a more sustainable youth engagement in these sectors. So I'm not so sure, I've lost track of how long I've spoken, but the last thing that I'll mention is that strategic partnerships holds all these down. Yeah, strategic partnerships holds all these down, while we are able to join our efforts together and have a shared aim and vision, so to reduce duplication of efforts across institutions. So these are the very interventions that I believe would help as we help our youth across the globe to be able to contribute their quota to sustainable food systems in the conversation of climate finance. Thank you so much, Julia. Over to you.
Thank you, Kofi. No, it was perfectly on time. A great presentation of the work that YPART does. And, you know, really the importance also of being part of this kind of global partnership. As you mentioned, you know, there is work to be done to make sure that as we look forward, new policies that involve anything related to agri-food systems really are really being inclusive in a way to be efficient, but also it's the only way. Being inclusive is really the only way to really be transformational, right? To have a positive impact then on people's lives. So that's why we're also very, very happy to have YPART as part of the not only a member but a board member actually of the FAST partnership. So really in first line to really make sure that the voices of the youth are heard when we're having these discussions about climate finance. I will now pass the floor to our last speaker, Matthew Walsham. He is social protection specialist, also from FAO, and he will tell us a little bit more on why social protection is actually important, with a focus on smallholder farmers and vulnerable groups. And I remind everyone there's a Q&A function, so if you have any question, you can start putting your questions there, and we will be able to answer them at the end of the presentation. All right, Matthew, floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Julia, and thanks also for inviting me along to participate in this session. And it's great to follow two really fascinating presentations with a really strong focus on youth inclusion. So my presentation is going to focus on inclusion a bit more broadly, including youth inclusion, but a sort of wider range of dimensions. And yeah, I'm going to look and explore the role of social protection in inclusive climate financing for agri-food systems. So you can all see my slides, okay? Yeah, just to check. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just say a few things about why social protection for climate action in rural areas. And then I'm going to look at some findings, a review that we did looking at how the UNFCCC climate funds are supporting social protection or aren't supporting social protection in rural areas specifically, and use that to kind of think through some considerations for future programming and future investments in this area. So it's stepping back to a kind of global focus, but hopefully I'm going to touch on a range of the issues that have been coming up in the first couple of presentations. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a broad agreement, certainly amongst the speakers so far, that we face a real challenge in terms of ensuring that climate finance really reaches not only the agricultural sector, but also the most vulnerable members of society within those rural settings. So, another statistic is that only 1.7% of climate finance really reaches small-scale farmers. So if you're looking at what's going into agriculture as a whole, an even smaller percentage actually reaches small-scale farmers. And the quotation I put here, to deliver socially inclusive, gender responsive, nature positive climate and development action, is actually a joint statement from the multilateral development banks at COP28, where again, I think there's a broad recognition now at the global level, including amongst providers of climate finance, that right now we're not doing a good enough job of driving that finance down really to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. So I'm focusing on social protection. I'm part of the social protection team within the Rural Transformation and Gender Equality Division at FAO. And the reason for that is, we don't think this is the only solution, but we think it's an important part of the solution because social protection mechanisms can really help to make climate action both more resilient, but also, critically more inclusive. Very briefly, I'm not going to go into detail here, but when we talk about social protection, we're talking about social assistance. So this would be cash transfers or public works programs, school feeding programs, talking about social insurance. So that could be unemployment benefits, health insurance, pensions. So often contributory or partially subsidised, and labour market interventions, really important. So vocational training, job placement services, but that can include training and skills on climate smart agriculture, for example. So it's that includes within the agricultural sector those kinds of interventions. I've got a link here to a piece of evidence that we produced very recently, only about a month ago, and hopefully that link will appear in the chat as well, showing that social protection programs are already delivering against these kind of critical dimensions of climate action. So shock responsive social protection responds when a hurricane hits or another climate shock like a drought. You can also do anticipatory action where you're in fact making payments before an event happens. If you can get the early warning systems in place to allow people to prepare, then during the shock and after. And I think this is probably right now the biggest focus really for climate finance directed towards social protection in existing systems. And it's really important, it's really critical. And obviously for agricultural stakeholders, absolutely. But social protection can do more. So it can promote climate adaptation. And here, if we think about, say, a regular income transfer, but alongside that, you can be providing, cash plus interventions to support people to put through climate smart agricultural interventions. So there's a PROESA program in Paraguay where the beneficiaries are receiving regular income, but they're also being supported to adopt sustainable agroforestry practices. So there you can really support people to adapt to climate change. It's also making contributions to climate mitigation. So this is including kind of pre-existing social protection programs that are doing in Ethiopia or in India through public works programs where they're doing interventions in rural settings to promote ecosystem services, and you can see really scalable impacts on climate mitigation, and then really critically easing the socio-economic impacts of climate mitigation policy. So there you're talking about potentially the impacts of the withdrawal of fuel or food subsidies, but also where you might see people needing to transition out of agriculture or to combine agricultural income with off-farm income. So the kinds of support that you can provide through social protection. And throughout this, the common thread really is ensuring that climate action is inclusive of the most vulnerable and reaches the poorest. So I just wanted to say a couple of things about, climate funds to start with, the UNFCCC funds, which was the main focus of what I'm going to speak about. Firstly, that there really are an increasing range of entry points for us to include social protection and this broader agenda around inclusive agro-food systems within the climate funds. So the Green Climate Fund strategic plan, has amongst its goals protecting the most vulnerable, supporting smallholder farmers, establishing early warning systems. They recognise that they're not yet doing enough in these areas and they need to drive action up. GEF, the Global Environment Facility, is moving in the direction of social inclusion, and hopefully GEF 9, which is coming up, the new replenishment, will have a much stronger focus on social inclusion. I think at the moment it's a little bit limited. But similarly, the multilateral development banks that I've already said, they really are now recognising the need to drive climate finance down to the local level, and that includes the World Bank, but other regional banks like the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, who have a kind of strong agenda on this. So just very briefly, we conducted a review of the UNFCCC climate funds to see to what extent they already had social protection mechanisms within their existing portfolio. And the aim for this is not just to find that out, it's an interesting thing to find out, but really to support a dialogue going forward on how do we both scale up and also strengthen the use of social protection within climate finance projects through the UNFCCC funds. So we want to think about key considerations for future investments of the funds, and we really critically want to identify some evidence and capacity gaps so that we can support people to develop programs going forward that really do reach the most vulnerable and meet the kinds of goals that I've been describing earlier on. So the key findings from this, very briefly, firstly, that there were 21 projects globally using social protection instruments. Of those, 19 were GCF projects. So it's really GCF is kind of leading the way in this regard. But that was still a tiny percentage. It was about 4% of the programs that we reviewed. I should say specifically reviewed programs with a focus on rural settings. So this is all talking to the agenda in terms of agri-food systems and rural areas. A mix of cash transfers, public works, vocational training with these complementary services. So again, support for people who are receiving cash transfers to do climate resilient agriculture, to engage in sustainable agroforestry practices, this kind of thing, and also piggybacking on existing social protection registries. So, where you've got the social welfare or the Ministry of Social Development who know where, or the Ministry of Agriculture who know where the most vulnerable are living, you can use these registries to ensure that your finance is really reaching where it needs to get to. And I think in terms of the inclusion agenda, I mean, certainly when you talk about the GCF programs, there's a broad-based agenda on gender sensitive programming, which is great to see. I think more could be done. We could be scaling up our ambition and trying to support more gender transformative approaches. And I don't think you see that yet within these kinds of programming, but there is an agenda there. And it's really encouraging to see over half of these programs have a explicit focus on youth inclusion. So I think of all the kind of inclusion agendas alongside gender, youth inclusion is being built into these programs. But I'm sure that our first couple of speakers would argue that more can be done. I mean, every project will have young people within its area. So why is it not part of the approach in every project? But there's other dimensions that I think are less so far are being given less attention. So the inclusion of people with disabilities, and we know that in rural areas, people with disabilities are engaged in rural agricultural livelihoods, and at the moment they're really being excluded from this kind of support. And similarly, migrants. So whether that's internal migrants, whether it's international migrants crossing borders, whether it's people who are forcibly displaced, at the moment they're really kind of falling between the cracks in terms of this form of programming. And then a final point is that really, for this, whether it's at whatever level you're talking, global, regional, national, subnational, local, we need to be working across sectors here. So not just the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of the Environment, and working to ensure that all of these projects and programs are strengthening systems going forward. So again, avoiding a projectized approach, building really strengthened systems. Now, I'm aware that I'm fairly close to time, so I'm just going to skip this. It's just to give a sense that we've got programs all over the world. 3 examples. So yeah, and I spoke already to the environmentally conditioned cash transfer in Paraguay, Poesa. In Botswana, we have an example of a public works program training people up as eco-rangers and as restoration workers using an existing government program. And in Vanuatu, developing a shock responsive cash transfer project with a focus on rural resilience. So last 2 slides, the consideration for programming and investments. Firstly, it shows that UNFCCC climate funds are already investing in social protection for rural populations, but there's huge potential for more. As I said, it's only 4% of the projects that we looked at. And when we're thinking about how to scale up those investments, we need to focus on strengthening systems. So this long-term approach, and really within our team at the moment, what we're thinking about is how to work with the funds to develop technical and programmatic guidance, and also how to work with partners at global level, regional level, but also national and subnational level, through partnerships like the FAST partnership, where we can bring together different stakeholders with these agendas, really to support them to develop projects and proposals that can then draw down that climate finance. So it's great to be able to speak to an audience like this. I think that really we want to be connecting in precisely these kinds of settings going forward. My final slide would just be to say something slightly broader, which is that, again, to flag up that the multilateral development banks are another important source of finance here, where we really need to be working with them to around this agenda. And I think that there's a kind of open door there. But when we're talking about really inclusive climate finance, that's the kind of the goal. Yeah, not just to bring this money down, but to make sure it's reaching the people who are most in need. Secondly, that if we're talking about advocacy, certainly for social protection instruments, but I think this speaks more broadly to the agendas we've been hearing. We really need to be getting these messages into the NDCs and the NAPs. So we've got the NDC process coming up next year, refreshed, revised NDCs. And if it's not in the NDC, it's going to make it much more difficult to draw down these forms of financing. So there's a real agenda there for everybody to work towards. And finally, another area that we're interested in is moving maybe a bit beyond the UNFCCC and the multilateral development banks to think about broader sources of climate finance, perhaps including blended finance, so bringing some private sector finance alongside the public finance. But that for us is very much a kind of a future agenda that I wanted to flag up. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand back to Julia.
Thank you, Matthew. That was really, going then into the nitty-gritty of what's happening, having a good understanding of, what's really happening really at project level, where social protection is there, and what's really is potential for the inclusion when we're talking about increasing climate finance for agri-food systems. Now we received, thanks to all the panelists first, of course, for their great interventions. We now have a few minutes left for some question and answers. So feel free to post them in the Q&A box. We got one question about the link also of FAST to COP, because it was mentioned probably that it was a COP initiative. So very briefly, the FAST was launched as a COP27 initiative, and then FAO was tasked with the operationalization of the initiative into a partnership. Now, the link to COP, it's quite important within the partnership, in the sense that the partnership really aims to foster COP-to-COP collaboration to make sure that these recognize the need for improved climate finance to agri-food systems. And as Matthew was just saying right now, making sure that this finance is actually trickling down to the people that are most in need. This has to remain very high in COP agendas. We're very aware of this. COP-to-COP collaboration is a key aspect. So the FAST is really putting an effort in making sure that we are able to support as much as possible presidential initiatives, showing the role that the FAST partnership and in general of the discussion about improved climate finance agri-food system can mean. So the FAST is among the priority action of the agriculture breakthrough agenda from COP26. We're implementing, of course, a COP27 initiative, not only with the FAST, but also in collaboration with the ICANN, which is an initiative on nutrition. We are among the implementers of the Emirates Declaration launched at COP28, and we all know that COP29 in Baku will have a strong focus on climate finance. So we're working with the presidency also to see how to really make sure that the FAST can continue its work among with the COP29 presidency priority agenda. So this is a very important aspect. I'm not sure we received other questions so far. Maybe I see one. I see that there is what initiative need to take for improving agricultural practice and to balance it with the changing climate scenario. So I let also the other panelists take a look at the question. In the meantime, I can start giving a first answer from our perspective. So. And here I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning on the importance of looking at this kind of challenges. I don't remember who mentioned it among the panelists, but with the long-term view, like what we're discussing now, they're not the things that are going to change with just one more project or just one more COP. These are very long. These are very long processes that we're talking about. So it is important to take into consideration very different aspects. So that's why, for example, the FAST initiative acts around 3 pillars that might seem different again, but they're very interconnected. So, for example, Access to finance cannot happen if you don't have improved policy and if you don't have the capacity also to implement at the national level. So this is something, especially as we're moving forward, is essential to consider, right? Taking into consideration all different aspects to make sure that we're considering the problem from 360 degrees. I will now maybe, I don't know if any of the panelists also would like to get a shot at an answer.
I mean, I don't mind
Yes,
just saying a little bit just to start with. I'm sure the other two have things to contribute. I mean, I don't think there is a single intervention that will work anywhere. It's really extremely context specific. I suppose one of the reasons that we're so, keen on promoting social protection as an instrument is that when you're talking about people in agricultural settings having to shift agricultural practices, there's a lot of risk involved there, and there's also the kind of need for investment alongside that. And we know that the poorest farmers are the least able to take on risk and to adopt new practices. Now, the idea, for example, of a cash transfer alongside this kind of support is that you can get this kind of regular income, you can give people a bit of reliable income to go there, and at the same time you can support them to adapt their practices in whatever makes sense in that context. Now, I mean, it's going to look radically different whether you're doing something in a drought-prone context, or whether the issue that you're facing is highly variable rainfall, or whether whatever the issue that is hitting you the hardest at this point in time. That has to be designed and delivered at the local level. But I suppose the point that we want to make is that when you are trying to support the most vulnerable, you need to ensure that you are doing it in a way that they are actually able to take these practices on board, because otherwise you'll be training people up in things that they just simply won't roll out, or you'll come back 2 years later and nobody will be doing these things.
I would just jump in and also say a narrative shift, to just emphasize on that point, Matthew. A narrative shift is also important, which is a very long-term thing as well. We know that when projects are implemented, you can have a project for 2 years, but it can take a decade or 15 years to even see a generation even to see a narrative shift. So while we may need, for example, yes, access to finance, enabling policies, we also need to have that kind of capacity building as well as narrative mindset shift to be able to see people, to be able to support people adopting these kind of good agricultural practices. So again, it's not the same for all contexts. It's going to look different, but I think that different things at the same time have to be put into place to be able to see the shift that we want to see.
Yeah. Sorry, I would like to add my voice to. Sorry, I dropped off for a while. I was struggling to connect because of the internet. I'm so sorry. But I believe that on the issue of this issue we're discussing now, what is also important is evidence. Everybody would like to adopt a practice because it has proved to be profitable. And so in all the important points that my colleagues raised, for us to invest in there, to train stakeholders, it would also be very important for us to document experiences. As we document our experiences, we'll be able to see what has been worthwhile in the past. In the case of Africa, we see that in times past, there have been some practices that were good, that they were actually climate smart, but we call these indigenous practices, or and these have proven to be good over time. So although we call them an innovation, we still acknowledge that some of these practices have been there. But the challenge has been with documentation, and it would help if we have the practices that work documented, as well as those that don't work anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Kofi. Yeah, that was, you know, a very important final point again on the importance of, you know, knowledge sharing, the importance of including very different groups, like, for example, also indigenous peoples that sometimes have, you know, so much knowledge to share about sustainable practices. So that's also very, a very key aspect. And thank you also, Matthew and Glindis, for coming in to answer this question. I think our time for the webinar is up. Thanks everyone, and maybe I will pass the floor over to Isabel or to PCCB for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Not Isabel. I'm Alejandro. I'm the manager of the Capacity Building Subdivision here at UNFCCC. Thank you very much. Very short closing remarks. Very refreshing webinar, really combining very important topics that we keep hearing in the UNFCCC process: access to finance, diversifying finance opportunities, not only focusing on the multilateral funds. And it's very refreshing to see that social protection is being pursued in that context, and also bringing the notion of youth. It's a consistent call from youth of how to materialize that entrepreneurship spirit youth have, and access to finance is a key enabler. So congratulations to the FAST partnership, and warm thanks to all our panelists, presenters, and our participants to have spent the time with us. And also, please continue to follow the PCCB network. We will continue to organize events, and thank you to those that are members of the network. And I think this shows that this is a useful space and platform for sharing experiences and hopefully materializing partnerships. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here to learn more about the FAST partnership and other initiatives, and see how they can be used as an example, or forces can be combined based on this webinar. So thank you very much, and wishing you everyone a nice continuation of the day wherever you are.